Hello, everyone. Welcome to our talk. And in this talk, we're going to share you with one of our recent work on the application auditing. So we built a framework to identify the private data collection behaviors from mobile applications, particularly Android applications. So this is the outline for today. First of all, we are going to give you a very brief introduction about ourselves. And second is a background. So in this part, we're going to give you a summary on the data protection regulations around the world. And we will focus on what kinds of implications were those data protection regulations introduced to the device vendors and application developers. The third part, we're going to introduce you our framework. We propose a few manual and automatic techniques to identify the data collection behaviors from mobile applications. And fourth, so based on our work, we will give a summary and also some recommendations on the private data protection on mobile platforms. And we are going to have for the fifth part will be like 5 minutes Q&A session. So first, about ourselves. My name is Bai Wendong, and I'm a senior lecturer from the University of Queensland, Australia. And my research is on mobile security and protocol analysis. And my partner Zhang Qing, he is now a senior Android security researcher from ByteDance, and his research direction is Android security and payment security. This is actually my third time to give presentation in Black Hat. I still remember my first talk is in Amsterdam in 2015. So I introduced my work on the application authentication in Black Hat Europe. Later in 2017, both myself and Zhang Qing gave another talk on 3G and 4G scanning in Black Hat Asia. And it's our honors to give the third talk today. Second, the background. So nowadays, the mobile devices already become the integral part of our daily life. We rely on a massive number of applications to do social engineering, online banking, online shopping, and financial services, and so on and so forth. It has been well known that those applications may collect our personal data, including the location, device ID, SIM card information, and sometimes even purchase or browsing history. They claim they're going to use those data for purposes like analytics, application functionality enhancement, and product personalization, and also third-party advertising. So this may raise concern as well. For example, I demonstrate a recent study listed here. That study analyzed a few messenger applications. So they identify that some applications may even request access to tens of types of personal data, even sometimes purchase history and financial information. So this raises privacy concerns. First of all, when we give access to those applications, we don't know how they are going to use our data and to whom they're going to share our data with. And second, those applications may reuse a few popular SDK or libraries for analytics or online advertising. This creates opportunities for some malicious entities to do cross-application tracking on users and also user profiling. So they may get our behaviors in different applications so that it's easier for them to track the users. So to protect the data, especially personal and private data, many countries and regions already put in place some strict data protection regulations. For example, in US, we know the famous CCPA, and in European Union, we know the most well-known GDPR. And also in Asia, we have different countries and regions already enact the data protection regulations. So next, what we're gonna talk about is what kind of requirements are introduced by those regulations, and more importantly, what kind of implications will be caused onto our developers and also device manufacturers. So I'm going to use GDPR as a case study to show you this. So GDPR came into force on May of 2018 in European Union countries, and it was a major update to the European Union Data Protection Directive introduced in 1995. So how you can understand GDPR? Basically, I would recommend you to get these 6 aspects. The first one is what. So basically, the GDPR is applied to those, they call it data controllers, who processing the personal data of EU or UK residents. Second one is which, so what kind of data is under the protection of GDPR. So basically any information related to Europe, to EU or UK citizens, whether they can be identified directly or indirectly. The third aspect is why. So why is GDPR proposed? Is to protect the personal data from misuse and to ensure data privacy. The fourth aspect, how. So later I will give you more details in the next slide, but here you can just summarize it into 2 aspects. The first aspect, GDPR impose more strict obligations to data controllers. And second aspect is GDPR tries to kind of give back the rights, the control to the data owners to handle their own data. So in next slide, I'll give you more detail. And the scope, GDPR will be applied to, globally to any organizations who process the information of European Union or UK residents. And the next aspect is the penalty. So any infringement or major data breach will result in large penalty. This can be up to 20 million euros or even 4% of the entity's global revenue. So let me zoom into the how. Basically, GDPR has 6 principles. So the first one, the personal data should be processed lawfully, fairly, and in a transparent manner. So basically, for the processing of the private data, those operations of processing need to follow the law and also need to be fair to the data owners, and also need to disclose everything to the data owners. The second principle, personal data should be collected for specified, explicit, and legitimate purpose. So that means, the data controllers cannot arbitrarily collect the data. They should declare that purpose to the data owner. Then follow that purpose, they can collect the data used for that specifically for that purpose. And the third principle, the personal information should be adequate, relevant, and limited to what is necessary. So it's quite similar to the least privilege principle. And fourth, the data should be accurate and whenever it's necessary, keep up to date. And fifth is about the period the data can be retained by the data controllers. So this time should be as short as possible. The last principle is about what kind of mechanism should be taken to protect the collected data. So the principle requires the data controllers to apply appropriate protection mechanisms on the data, the user data they collected. So I just have a very quick summary not summary, but introduction on what is the difference between GDPR and other regulations. So mostly the principles are generally applicable, but there is some minor difference, especially on the scope and application region of those regulations. So for example, here I list the scope and region difference between US CCPA and European Union GDPR. So you can find that they have, for GDPR is applicable to the entities in Europe and also to those entities who process data related to Europe citizens. And for CCPA is on the other way, is to applicable to the California resident and also to those entity organizations who do business in California. So with those regulations, those device vendors or market managers also provide strict requirements for privacy policies. So for example, here I take the Google Play as an example. You can see the highlight words in this slide. So it requires the data controller, basically those applications, to protect the privacy and give the legal use to the users. And also they need to be transparent to the users who they collect data from. And other things, informations are also listed in the requirements. So whoever wants to upload their applications to Google Play must satisfy those requirements. Basically, those requirements can be summarized into 4 aspects. So the applications need to make explicit, make clear to the users what kind of data they're going to collect and what is the purpose to collect the data, and if they are going to share the data to whom, and also need to be transparent to the users how they are going to protect the user's data. And it also has very clear definition on the user data. So they need to, for those applications, if they want to handle user data, they need to disclose the application's access, collection, use, and sharing of the data, and they need to limit the use of the data. And if this user data happens to be personal and sensitive information, so I would introduce this thing in next slide. They need to give explicit privacy policy. So you can find those personal and sensitive information include so-called personally identifiable information. So those information can directly or indirectly link to the user. And then financial payment information, authentication information, phone book, contacts, device locations, and so on and so forth. So if the applications involves the use of such data, they need to fulfill those 5 requirements, like to limit the access, collection, use, and sharing, and to post explicit privacy policy, and to handle the privacy data in a secure way, and so on and so forth. So if you go to Google Play, you look at those major applications, you will find that they have such privacy policy. So basically, in those policies, they usually cover these six themes. The first one is how the application will collect the data. Is through API, through camera, through microphone, or through what? And the second, what is the purpose to collect the data? And third is a period the application will keep the data. And if they are going to share the data, to whom and when they're going to share. And also they will make it clear what kind of control the data owners have. And the last one, if they involve some children's data, they need to give a more clear policy on that. So the next part is about the framework. Basically, after study those regulations and Google's policies, we try to propose a framework so that it can be used to automatically or semi-automatically do the application auditing on the private data processing. So our motivation or our goal is, when we're going to conduct application privacy compliance auditing, how can we ensure that the testing or auditing covers most, if not all, most privacy compliance issues? Because the privacy data can be scattered, like distributed in the system. So sometimes you need to use APIs to access, and sometimes you may just need to use some sensors or camera or microphone to collect those data. So it's quite tedious for the auditor to assess every aspect during the auditing process. So our motivations, we are trying to kind of break down or kind of push from regulations to practice, because you can find the regulations, as I just mentioned, is quite in a principle level. They are sometimes abstract, theoretical, or complex. So we're gonna really, push this thing into a practical tool. The second motivation is the from passive to active. That means those stakeholders like application developer, users, or manager of application market is kind of current reaction is very passive. They identify, oh, there's vulnerability there, then they just do some response. But is it possible, before that vulnerability is identified by user or exploited by attacker, can we identify them? So it's kind of from passive to active. The last part is from research to application. So we have much experience in this area. So we're thinking, is it possible for us to put what in our brain into some real world applications, some hands-on things, and some tools or guidelines that can be followed in assessment or auditing. So we follow such a thing. We have a global view. Basically, we take into consideration the entire data lifecycle. And meanwhile, we are going to break down into enforceable checklist or tools. So this result in two-level thing or in our framework. The logic level, so it's from the global view. We're gonna give information to the decision makers or managers, to let them have a big picture about the potential scenarios where privacy issues may occur. And meanwhile, we're gonna give enforceable guidelines to the auditors and analysts for them to make inspections in an efficient and comprehensive way. So in a logic level, we consider the entire data lifecycle, including the data collection, data transmission, storage, and data use. So what we do is we break down these 4 types into a few items, and for each item we give description. So this is to let the decision maker to understand what does this item cover, and sometimes the item need to be manually checked, and if possible we will provide some automation tools. So for example here, for the collection of user data, we break down it into 4 items. And the first item is to collect and use data within the scope of user authorization. So this, it will check whether the collection of user data by the applications go beyond the data they claim that they list in a privacy policy. So the same thing for other items, and I will leave it for your reading instead of look through it one by one. So we further break down them and make them enforceable into the enforcement level. So I identify kind of exit points where we can check those violations of the user private data collection. So for example, for the network request, we check whether application upload user data and what kind of data they will upload, and when they upload, do they encrypt the data, and also do they access and upload some data which shouldn't be, which is out of the use, out of the purpose they claimed. And in our framework, we also take into consideration the policy difference among countries. So for example, in some countries, the regulations require dynamic granting. So whenever an application use a permission, they need to get users granting at that runtime. And some is one-time granting. It's like during application installation or login, the user need to check the policy and give the permission to the user. So next, I'm gonna have my partner Zhang to give you more introduction on our framework. So he will focus on the enforcement level to give you the tools and techniques that we use in our framework. And also he will give you a demonstration.
Hello everyone, I'm Zhang Qing. Let me introduce you several automatic tools in the framework made by us and the test results. The first one is the domain test tool. It can obtain all IP addresses and domains from application to check if they belong to trustworthy entities. The second one is the privacy pop-up window test tool. It can test if application obtains users' privacy information before user agrees to privacy policy using a hook. The third one is application scan tool. It can check all the APIs related to privacy. The last one is the traffic detection tool. It can obtain all network traffic of the application we're running. We use these tools to check the part of the privacy issues. Here is some typical privacy information in the Android system. We use this tool to check. There are 3 types of permission in Android system, but we just focus on 2 of them. One is dangerous permission, another is normal permission. About the dangerous permission, you need to request the runtime permission in your application before you can access the restricted data or perform restricted actions, such as location. About the normal permission, you just need to edit in the manifest file. You will get the data, such as Wi-Fi information. Here we list many common privacy information associated with. Some of them will surprise you. The first one is Android serial number. There are 4 ways to get it in different Android versions, such as we can use the static field serial to get it without any permission on Android 8. We can also use the function get serial to get it on Android 8. This function needs the reader full state permission, which is a dangerous permission. Very surprising, right? The second one is Wi-Fi information, such as we can read the address file to get the MAC address. We can also use the ARP file to get the root MAC address. This completely bypassed the API requirements. What's more, there are several information people often refer to, such as the Android ID, application list, and the clipboard. Unacceptably, this information don't need any permission to be able to read them in some Android version. Here we just talk about the information in some Android version. There may be some changes with the Android update. We just see some API functions. Let's talk about the field. We know that there are some hooking tools. There are some hook tools to monitor function calls, such as Frida and Expose. But we can't use these tools to hook a field call, such as build point serial. Here we have done an automated and instrumentation technology to achieve static field mounting. Let's see how we did it. The first step is DEX to Smiley. Then add the log and self-signature hook modules to the last DEX. The second step is add the log code to those place after the field. Then we add the signature code to the application class to make sure we can replace the original signature. Now we can build all the DEXs. Then we use the new DEXs to replace the DEXs in the APK. Finally, we can sign the APK using your own signature. Now, when the application is running, the field when it's used, the log will print. Here is a video demo to show how the automated tool work or monitoring the access about user privacy information before agreeing the privacy policy. We add some getting the privacy information actions when user reads the privacy policy file in the demo. Then we use the tool to test it. We can see the call log and the call action results are recorded in the SD card files. Let's look at the demo. You can see the using log are recorded in this file. You can also the statics are recorded in this file. Okay, this is the demo. Let's see the next page. In this page, we have categorized the functions related to similar senses. There are 13 types of privacy information in this table. For example, we classify BSID, SSID, and MAC address, and so on as Wi-Fi related, and other privacy information are listed. Then we use the automated tool to test about 1,500 popular applications from several application stores. The test aspects are the access about user privacy information in the table. The two pictures show the statistical results about our test. We did a total count about 1,000 applications cause some privacy-related functions, even except task and system property, in which there are also 579 applications using abnormal ways to get the privacy information. The figure on the right shows how many application calls were made for each of the 13 types of privacy information. On this page, the left one shows how many applications using the different kinds of privacy information. The right one shows how many times of the two types of permission-related or privacy information functions called. We found that the number of the function call for privacy information about the normal permission was quite high. Okay, that's the test. That's all. Let's Guangdong continue. Thank you.
Thank you, Zhangqing. So now we comes to the last part of today's presentation. And in summary, we propose a framework which can be used to audit Android applications for the private information collection behaviors. And our framework covers both logic view to give the decision makers a big picture about different scenarios that may involve privacy leakage. And we also provide the analyst and auditor enforcement level tools and techniques for the hands-on, actually practical auditing. And we also, based on this work, we also list several recommendations to the mobile device users. Basically, the users should pay attention to two aspects. The first one is to try upgrade the operating system to the latest version. So here I use Android as an example. You can find Android use some new mechanisms for the privacy protection, including restrictions on the user unresettable data items, and also some user resettable identifiers like the advertisement ID And also it may enforce further permission to access some particular data. For example, in Android 10 and Android 11, if the application want to access the Wi-Fi or network APIs, they need to get a fine location permission. The other recommendation we want to give to the user is pay attention to those privacy policies released by the applications to check how the application will collect, use, share the personal data. So that is all about talk today, and we're happy to take questions. Thank you.